So really simply, how do we know? Epistemology. What do we know? Metaphysics. How do we act? Ethics. And how do we act as communities? Politics. Lastly on this list is relationality, which is the idea that we are connected to other people, and relationality is opposite of an individualistic model that prizes autonomy. So with these words in mind, now let's redescribe Cavarero's work, because I think this serves as a good foundation for us moving forward. By trade, Cavarero is a philosopher and a philologist. That is, she studies thinking and she studies the construction of words. She's an expert in the areas of classicism, so ancient thought, feminism, how do we ensure the equality of women, and ontology, how do we meaningfully lead our lives. She uses the philosophical practices of ethics, the way we act with others, and politics, the way we act as communities, in her research. She believes that the framework of our lives is relational and that we are meaningfully connected to the world around us as opposed to individually composed. So let's dig into Cavarero's work. Her work is grounded in classical studies. She spends a lot of time thinking about Plato and Aristotle. And it's here that I want to start talking about inclinations. I believe that you've already been discussing Aristotle's Poetics. That's what Melissa just mentioned. So I'm going to dig into Plato here. The truth is that Plato has a really confusing relationship with art. On the one hand, Plato associates good or truth with beauty, but on the other hand, he considers art dangerous. This is a little confusing because we typically think of art as something beautiful and even soothing and comforting. But in Book 10 of the Republic, he says, art corrupts the minds of all who hearken to them, save only those whose knowledge of reality provides an antidote. So why would Plato make this statement? The Republic is Plato's articulation of what an ideal city, state, government, what have you, looks like and how it functions. Because Plato is a philosopher, of course, the Republic is led by a philosopher. So, as we mentioned before, if philosophers are interested in truth, Plato wants to support activities in the Republic that are rational and that help us uncover and sustain truth. Art, therefore, is dangerous because it can obfuscate the truth. It has the ability to intoxicate us with images and call into question our sense of morality. If philosophers are interested in truth, art is harmful because it does not rely on truth at all. In fact, what makes art so wonderful is it doesn't even have to be real, right? And Plato is worried that art can be so confusing that it will inevitably keep us from being reasonable. That is, art destroys the city's foundation of reason. So this is best illustrated in an earlier section of the Republic in the cave allegory. And most of you who have taken philosophy have probably heard the cave story. So we'll just hear it again. It's a great story. And keep in mind that an allegory is just a story used to teach a principle. Plato uses the images of a cave to talk about how we move from irrationality to rationality through the process of thinking. He sets the stage for the cave allegory by this, and it's on the screen. This is actually from a translation of the text. Imagine men living in a cave with a long passageway stretching between them and the cave's mouth, where it opens wide to the light. Imagine further that since childhood, the cave dwellers have had their legs and necks shackled so as to be confined to the blinders that prevent them from turning their heads. They can only see what is directly in front of them. Next, imagine a light from a fire some distance behind them and burning at a higher elevation. Between the prisoners and the fire is a raised path along whose edge there is a low wall like the partition at the front of the puppet stage. The wall conceals the puppeteers while they manipulate their puppets above it. So Plato's description of a cave sounds kind of like our experience of going to see a movie. At the movies, we see a story that seems real, but isn't. And so the cave allegory is Plato's way of saying, get up out of your seats and engage with the real world. So after this description of the cave, Plato then considers what happens if someone leaves the cave. So in the allegory, he actually describes the journey to the outside world. We crouch through small caverns until we, like passages, until we reach outdoors, and then we can stand upright and bask in the sun. And that sunshine is the real and rational world for Plato. It's not dictated by shadows and fiction, The world is seen in its clarity through the light. So through the good, through the light, through truth. So this seems simple enough. But what happens if we want to share our experience with our community? What happens if I want to go back into the cave? So we're going to picture the descent back into the cave now. As we move from our upright posture outside the cave, we now must crouch down in order to return to the cave. In that journey, our eyes that are now accustomed to the light are temporarily blinded. And our people down in the cave, they see that we're blinded and they believe that the outside world is harmful. They should stay in the cave forever. Why would they want to go outside the cave? So, how is this connected to Adriana Cavarero? Using Plato as a source, Cavarero questions the idea that being upright, so outside of the cave, is a more important position than being inclined inside the cave. So just one more time. Cavarero questions the idea that being upright is more important than being inclined. So why is relationality inside the cave not just as important as the individual process we go through outside the cave? Or why is being alone, standing up straight in the rational world more important than being with others, crouched down, trying to discover and discuss the rational world together? And this is sort of the crux of the argument throughout the whole book. Through the cave allegory, Cavarero sets the stage to further explore how ethics and politics are based on the imagery of verticality, so standing up straight in the light as rightness, versus inclination, which is crouching in the cave as badness. That's the sort of underlying thesis here. Throughout the text, I know that you didn't have a chance to read the whole thing. Cavarero provides numerous examples of how verticality is positioned against inclination and how it's associated with rectitude or right acting. And so we have some phrases that support this. Have you heard like follow the straight and narrow path? He's a stand-up person. You should stand up straight. Homo erectus is a person where because we're standing upright over the animals, we should, control them. And these are all idioms that associate verticality with goodness. But let's see how these phrases intersect with categories that Cavarero addresses in the text. So these are sort of pieces within the book that were not included in your passages. So first is rationality. Cavarero makes the claim that the Western tradition aligns rationality with uprightness. And we just talked about this in the cave allegory. We stand upright, we stand up straight in light of day, and we're able to use reason to assess any situation. So next is adaptability. She makes the claim that the ability to go from slouching to standing up straight, it physically shows the world that you're a good, reasonable, hardworking person. So stand up straight. You're ready to make things happen. You're capable of adequately engaging with the world. So next is autonomy. So uprightness, according to Cavarero, is associated with independence. Like he's a stand-up guy. You're a person who can survive without others. You don't need anyone to take care of you or give you guidance. You stand up straight on your own. The next category is morality. So uprightness is associated with morality. Follow the straight and narrow path means that you're able to, despite all temptation, act appropriately. And lastly, power. So power, like I mentioned before, we physically stand over animals, objects, and people who are weaker than us. We should have the ability, and we should assert that power because that's our goal. That's what we're meant to do. So the question comes then for Cavarero, like thinking about the all these sort of idioms and what we have associated with upright behavior. She asks, but why not inclination? Why do we not have better traits or ideas associated with inclination? Because there has to be some good that comes from not standing up straight. Right. And so I have this picture of Rodin here, of Rodin's thinker. So thinking can be a posture that isn't vertical. Wondering or puzzling over something, which is the first step in learning, can cause us to slump over. And isn't it important that we take care of others? Shouldn't that be valued? And oftentimes when we talk to a child or help them learn to walk, we crouch down to meet their eyes. Our eyes meet one another. Lastly, isn't it important that we take care of our body? We must crouch and stretch in order to maintain our physical selves. So Cavarero uses the idea of inclination, this image, to say sometimes standing upright is just not the best posture. Though verticality is an image associated with rationality, adaptability, autonomy, morality, and power, sometimes those are not the most responsible and ethical ways to approach the world. For example, reason doesn't always explain the love you feel for someone. Sometimes you don't want to be alone. You want to be with someone else. And sometimes lying makes another person feel better in a time of need. So she's trying to reposition inclination, but she's very clearly in the text, she's not saying that verticality is bad. She simply wants us to be more open to the complexities that exist in the world. We're going to position this a little bit more philosophically and look at the geometry of inclination through the thought of Hannah Arendt and Judith Butler. Hannah Arendt she was a political theorist, political philosopher in the 20th century. Arendt says, every inclination turns outward. It leans out of the self in the direction of whatever may affect me, from the quote, from the outside world. And Judith Butler, who is a pioneer in queer theory and comparative literature, says, it may well be that every form of appearance is constituted by its outside. So if we think about it like this, for Arendt, we lean out and touch the world in order to engage with it. And for Butler, the world touches us. And I like to think about this in terms of equilibrium in physics. When two forces act against one another, they don't move. So in the case of Cavarero, Arendt, and Butler, that equilibrium is just not vertical, it's inclined. And so inclination doesn't mean that the stance is less stable. It just means that its stability is demonstrated in a different type of geometry. And this is probably easier to visualize in architecture. So buildings can withstand gravity when they are balanced, not just stacked as vertical boxes. This is the work of Zaha Hadid. She is an Iranian architect and the first woman to win the Pritzker Prize, which is the Lifetime Achievement Award in architecture. Hadid designed the Maxi Museum in Rome. That's what this building is. And it exhibits contemporary art, and you must go when you go to Rome. But you can see here that Hadid did not design a fully upright and stacked building. This is not like a tall office building. There are sections that are cantilevered. They jut out, defying gravity, and they stay in place through equilibrium. Like the imagery of Arendt that we just saw on the previous slide, the building leans forward to the city of Rome, inviting people to visit. And if you listen to talks or writings of Hadid, she very much talks about how her architecture is created to invite the world into her buildings. And she has these very interesting investigations into pedestrian movements and sort of vehicular patterns and things like that, if you like things like that. So we're going to look inside the Maxi Museum because we can't go there today. And we'll see that Hadid not only uses diagonals in the staircase, which is typical, right? Staircases are diagonal, unless you're going to the top of a bell tower, which are very vertical, they're diagonal. But even in her diagonal staircases, even those have diagonals within the diagonals. It's just a different, it doesn't make the staircase less stable, it just makes it different. And it provides a different experience for the people navigating through the space, which is the purpose of that little jut. I want to also talk about diagonality through Bernini. So this is Bernini's sculpture of Saint Teresa of Avila. And this is also in Rome, and it's in this curious, odd little church in this very off the beaten path neighborhood. And you would never know from the outside that it has this beautiful Bernini inside of it. It's like a little treat. But I wanted to show the sculpture because it gives us the opportunity to talk about inclination in another way, which is disposition. We're going to kind of focus on that. In Bernini's sculpture of Saint Teresa, she's reclining. She is physically in awe of the power of the angel and, of course, of God. She isn't upright like the angel. She's a human prone to sin. She reclines, but her posture does not demonstrate her sinfulness. It illustrates her disposition of devotion, how she's sort of like her mouth is open and all these sorts of things. So in chapter 9, which I hope some of you had the chance to read, Cavarero addresses inclination as disposition. And she discusses this both in positive and in negative terms. This is my dear friend, Maria Callas. When Cavarero discusses inclination in the negative sense, she draws upon feminist theory. Underlining the totality of Cabarero's work is a questioning of the traditional Western idea that there are male attributes and female attributes, that we lean sort of one way or the other. So kind of summarily, Cavarero does not believe that certain behaviors are masculine, so assertiveness, confidence, competitiveness. She doesn't believe that those are masculine and that other behaviors like meekness or insecurity, others are feminine. And for many feminists, including Cavarero and Butler, the idea of femininity is socially constructed and is ingrained within us through behavioral training and upbringing. So in addition to that, she even questions if there are specific attributes, why do they need to be corrected? In the text, she talks about a tree. It's a really great chapter. She talks about a tree, and if a tree is leaning, right, we're supposed to prop it up so it can grow straight. But do we actually need to always prop the tree up? Aren't some of the best climbing trees the ones that are sort of bent that we can maneuver around? So using the categories we just discussed, Cavarero is rebelling against the idea that men and masculine traits are necessarily vertical and that women and feminine traits are not vertical. So she's actively questioning, like, are only men follow the straight and narrow path? Only men can be stand-up people? Only men can stand up straight? That's sort of the core of the inquiry here. And in fact, she talks about the feminine association with irrationality, like not being upright. Because in order to, like, when we talk about love, we talk about falling in love, like we are off center. And I think that sort of fits in with this. I have this picture of Maria Callas and Medea, sort of fits into what y'all were talking about with Medea, right, Melissa?
Yes. Yes, sorry. I have trouble unmuting, as we all know it can be. I wanted to just say a couple of things about what you have spoken on so far in regards to what we have studied. One is to go back just a moment to the allegory of the cave and to talk about how that relates to the idea that art, I mean, you could say, I'm maybe extrapolating, but maybe Plato's kind of saying art is fake in a way. It's not real because it's in the cave. And that's similar to what we talked about with this idea of mimesis, which is the, imitation, right? People like to imitate, and that's a very big part of theater. And then this, again, just the feminism idea that Medea was, condemned basically to this position within the play because of her role as a female. She couldn't do, and the things that she did, if a man had done those things, would it be seen the same way? And I think that's a really important question. And lastly, regarding Medea and falling in love and the idea of that cantilevered, that when you have someone who loves you and you love them, you are positioned in a way that is stable, but once it starts to change, that's when the falling becomes totally flat, which of course we saw happen to Medea, and the way that she reacted to that was, tragic. So those were the ideas I had. Oh, one more thing about the Medea, in regards to the turning outward, Arendt's idea of, meeting the world as turning outward. And I think theater is definitely that outward expression of an inner life, right? We see the words are saying things, but also the characters, because they're moving about and their, action is happening. It's really illustrative of theater, which is an outward expression. That was all I had to say.
Oh, thank you. Okay, well, I think we'll keep talking about disposition, but in positive terms. So we were talking about the negative aspects of disposition, but let's talk about its positivity through the work of Artemesia Genlusi. In chapter 9, which again, if you didn't get a chance to read it, I hope that you do get a chance to read it because it's really lovely. Cavarero talks about inclination as a leaning toward a talent or a creative idea, and she uses the work of 17th century artist Artemesia Genlusi. And she does this, and that's what this section of the painting. And Cavarero accomplishes this in a couple of ways. First, like really straightforwardly, art historically, in this painting, the allegory of inclination, literally, Artemesia paints a woman leaning toward a star. In this posture, she is aligned with the light, maybe moving towards a lucky star or toward a talent, but it kind of implies a creative process or an idea, and it looks like she's headed towards something kind of spectacular and wonderful. But while this is great, it's a valid reading of the painting, Cavarero also uses Artemesia for other reasons, because the idea of spectacular and positive disposition just doesn't end with this particular painting. Artemesia's biography, her life itself, sort of attends to this as well. So Artemesia was an incredible Baroque painter. And it's a shame there was a solo exhibition. It's going to be at it's going to be in London. I made a note to write that down. It was supposed to be in London this summer, and it had to cancel. But at any rate, at a time when women were not considered proper artists, Artemesia was incredibly successful. She had a lot of clients who wanted their portraits painting, and so she did follow her disposition towards painting. Like, no one could tell her she shouldn't paint. And she became a member of the Academy of Art and Design in Florence. And she traveled. She had clients all over the place. And so, going back to Zaha Hadid, both Artemesia and Zaha Hadid were women in men's professions who achieved a level of proficiency and success that women before them had not known. But Cavarero also discusses Artemesia's inclination in the context of legal justice. So again, we get to Artemesia is the perfect example, right? Because we have her painting. It shows sort of this art historical visual imagery. We have her life that attests to this idea of positive disposition. But then the third is in the context of legal justice. At a young age, Artemesia was raped by her art teacher, and definitely out of line with that time period and with an immense sense of bravery. Artemesia testified against her rapist in court. And in a way, this proving that women too can be upright and do the right thing, can be brave, right? Defying the idea that women are creatures that knowingly invoke the sexual appetites of men, and knowing sort of like what we were talking about before with the feminist critique. And she also testified knowing that she would be publicly ridiculed and tortured, which she was. So in all these ways, Artemesia exemplifies that women are not naturally inclined to immorality, that they are of equal worth and moral character to men, and that violence against them should be punished as they would be if against other men. So again, inclination as disposition in this case illustrates the way to see a painting, to understand a person's story, and a way to understand the law. And that's one of the wonderful aspects of Cavarero's work, is that she chooses the perfect examples to align her thought. So now that we've had some time to talk about Cavarero, let's move back to something we talked about earlier and start summing things up here. So we'll go down this list. Cavarero, especially through chapter 9, right, the section on disposition, Cavarero demonstrates that she is a philosopher and a classicist, drawing upon the works of philosophers before her, like Plato. She also demonstrates that she's a philologist, and she uses etymology to support her thesis. And that's more specifically broken down in the text. I didn't necessarily get to that. She also affirms her alignment with feminism through her discussion of women being traditionally considered immoral, and discusses ontology through the idea of living a creative life. She considers these thoughts ethically and politically. So we kind of looked at that through her use of Artemesia Genlusi as an example. And Cavarero also supports a relational model and devalues an individualistic model, because she affirms that Artemesia's success relied upon not only her innate talent, but her ability to depend upon others, her ability to market her work. So in closing, Adriana Cavarero, who clearly I love, through a variety of disciplines and practices, she tries to rethink some basic philosophical principles. In Inclinations, through the book, she uses geometry, math, to talk about ethics and politics. She tells us that verticality and uprightness is not necessarily the best way for us to live in the world all the time. And her work itself, I think, demonstrates a sense of inclination. She definitely moves away from a sort of traditional form of philosophical discourse, which of course categorically, typically, historically excludes women from it at any rate. And she also weaves together a variety of images to tell a philosophically story. And I think that her process and what she's trying to achieve probably more accurately describes our human condition. And I'm going to leave you guys with that thought. There you go. All right. Thanks.
Okay, finally, I unmuted. I don't know why it keeps doing that. That was fabulous, Joy. I mean, just so layered, very, so much there to dig in with. And I know that those of you who haven't really studied philosophy, in some ways, I think this is very accessible because of the way that Cavarero talks about things. That I think do relate more to our human condition specifically now in a lot of ways, right? In the time of COVID. I wonder if there'll be, I don't know, some literature, art coming out of this time like it was, like it has
1989.
Exactly. Or in the time of cholera.
Right, exactly.
I wonder if anyone, especially any of you who have studied philosophy, if you have any questions for Joy about, anything really, but specifically some of the things that we have studied that I am not a philosopher, so I may not be able to answer, in relation to interdisciplinarity and theater, or anything that you have studied so far, because you've had 2 other sections of this class now of art and I believe music. Actually, I'm not sure which ones you guys have had. I think those are the 2. Anything you can think of through this philosophical lens that you might want to ask Joy, or just about philosophy in general. And I will leave for a few moments, leave it quiet, because it took me like 5 times to unmute myself. So I'm going to wait. And also you can put something in the chat. I'm monitoring the chat if you would like to, if you can't unmute and you want to say something in there. And I will just prompt you with the fact that the assignment has been released for tonight, your last assignment, and it is a reflection upon this discussion and upon what Joy has brought to us tonight. So I encourage you to get some, if you want to look at the assignment, you could do that while we're discussing, so that you could see if there's anything that could, be further before you have to write out that little response. Let's see. In fact, maybe what I'll do is just go into that form and see if there's any questions that we could just talk with Joy about, because I think it would be interesting to hear her perspective.
Hi, I'm not studying philosophy, but I had a question. We talked a lot about women in philosophy and how, they get criticized a lot, or used to, back in the olden days. I was just gonna ask, you talked about how Plato had his views on how society um, should be run in order for it to bloom rationally. Are there any like female philosophers that you would recommend that I could read up on, um, that have like talked about theories about society in the way that Plato did, like
This is
just to
like,
have a different perspective?
it's like the best question anyone has ever asked me in all the lectures I have ever given. I am so grateful to you. Yes, there are. Yes, there are. One person who I think is really fantastic is Martha Nussbaum. And Martha Nussbaum teaches philosophy, religion, and law at the University of Chicago. And there are two books that she's written that I think are very accessible and very important. The first is Poetic Justice. And this she wrote in sort of the context of her legal courses. Her proposition is that if we have people in power who are like judges who are saying grace and giving sentencing to people who they know nothing about, have never had any experience with, Martha Nussbaum says it is imperative that people engage with literature so that they can build empathy, they can relate and discuss like the world with people who are not like them. She wrote this in 1995, so this is many, many years ago, but it was sort of radical when she wrote it. So that's the first thing that she's written that I think is really great. There's also a book that came out in 2017 called The Monarchy of Fear. And it is her reflection on sort of the state of contemporary politics and how instead of constantly being afraid that liberty and freedom they're being taken away from us, but to reflect upon how governments and laws, democracy and republicanism functions, to really reflect on that in order to gain some perspective. Again, some people would find that very radical. She's a professor of law, and so she has a lot of deference to legal processes, but the text is really quite lovely. Also, of course, I'm a proponent of Hannah Arendt because that's who I've studied. Probably the book she's most famous for is Eichmann in Jerusalem, but my probably favorite is The Human Condition. And then, of course, Judith Butler, who I mentioned here as well. And she's her most famous text is probably Gender Trouble, but she's written a lot. You can Google her and get some good like sort of magazine articles. It's probably easier to read than Gender Trouble. Yay! Thank you for that question.
Thank you for answering. I'll check those out, definitely.
Thanks, Desiree. Joy, are there any philosophers from the ancient time periods that were women?
Oh.
I mean, I know I'm blanking on her name now. There was one that Hypatia.
So she's only mentioned once, but I really love this story. And Cavarero writes about her, right? There's Diadema. So in the symposium, is that who you were thinking at? Like in the symposium, Plato's trying to, symposium is about love, is Plato's meditation on love, which is actually Plato writing down Socrates' discussion about love. But in the symposium, when Socrates is asked what love is, he says the only person who knows what love is Diadema, who is an oracle. So it's like, I think it is literally the only time a woman is mentioned as like intellectually, and she's the one who knows, the only one who knows what true love looks like, as in the context of Plato trying to write this dialogue. So I really like that. And Cavarero writes about that too.
Yeah. Here are a couple questions that I asked on the Inclinations response. which if the students haven't opened it yet, then we can maybe discuss some of these. One is how do the concepts of Cavarero's ideas about inclination align or reject futurism ideals? I thought that might be interesting.
I mean, I think they should answer that question.
Right. No, I do too. But I think there are some interesting, I mean, I think it's something to bring up. Like, we just had a lecture on futurism. And so does anybody want to take a stab at how this might connect or not, you know, or why it wouldn't necessarily. Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe it's the same in some way. Anyone?
Well, I'll give my
You'll
opinion.
answer your own?
I'll answer my own
Great. I want to hear what you think. And then I want to hear also what all of you think in your response, okay? No, I mean.
So I think you and I usually, when we talk about futurism, we talk about collage a lot, right? We have that discussion. And that collage is literally the idea of like turning things kilter, like tearing things apart, cutting it, and not relying on this like even typeset, like this absolute verticality of the type where each little letter has the same space because it's actually put on a typesetting machine, right? The futurists are like, okay, well, if we have to deal with your upright type, that's fine, but we're just going to do something else with it completely. We're going to like make it off kilter. So I think that is exactly what Cavarero is talking about, especially when you think about the fact that futurism ultimately had to use paper, like 8.5 by 11 or whatever size paper. So they were working within a vertical format, and they were choosing to incline or be diagonal in some cases within this verticality. So it literally does demonstrate the geometry that Cavarero is trying to construct.
And I think, again, even though the futurists are against feminism, in a lot of ways, they are using those exact attributes, what you just described, which is taking a format and putting it in another discipline, like taking words and performing them, or taking a painting and making, we talked about this last night, was Bala's taking his painting, making a set design, and then playing music and having the lights be the actors, right? So that's like a, you know, so that's them utilizing this very idea to create art that's not verticality and a rejection of basically that we talked a lot about that in the manifestos, the rejection of the institutionalized anything. So anyone else want to discuss? They're a quiet group, I guess.
Wow.
We've had more in the past, we've had more discussion or questions, but perhaps they're tired.
I do believe
nothing
that,
even in the chat. Oh, sorry?
Yeah, from what you were saying, contribution to, I guess, her philosophies and everything were definitely a contribution to the movement as a whole. As I could see from what you were discussing in the slideshow, the ideas that she had about, let me get my notes here, sorry. So when you were talking about verticality, I can't pronounce it.
Yeah, it's a hard one.
Yeah. Stop it. Biff. Sorry, that's my dog. When you're talking about verticality, how she feels, then why not the inclination? Why not, what is it called?
Diagonality.
What am I trying to say here? Yeah. Crap. I'm sorry. I completely blanked. But I just, what you were talking about with the things that she was trying to convey seemed to be fairly important to, I guess, pieces now, especially since she was such a pioneer with the ideas that she created and also expanded upon. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think that she's, thank you for that. I think that she's really interesting to look at in terms of plurality. We're about to have a big election, right? And don't want to get into politics here, but just that when in some discourse, we have this radical rejection of a norm, right? So we'll just say like the patriarchy is bad, reject the patriarchy. Cavarero is not into rejecting much of anything. I said she rejected these sort of normatives, yes, but she's interested in pluralism. What I mean by that is she is interested in having this grid, for lack of a better word, because we're talking about geometry here. Oh, yes, okay, yes. I'm like, you can see my hand gestures. I'm talking about a grid here. She's thinking about plurality almost through an image, that there are all these different points and different lines, and people inhabit these different parts of the page, and that it's fine. It's fine that they're in these different parts. They can be like absolute vertical lines, they can be squiggle lines, they can be diagonals, whatever. That sort of she's saying that we are in this, we share this space, this grid, and she wants to provide room for everyone to be within it. So the asking why not inclination is not saying no, verticality is bad. She's not saying that. She's just like, why not think about this a little bit more? Why not consider, right? Why not ask a few more questions? And so again, why I bring this up to politics is that that is sort of a type of political thinking, which is, why does that person think that? Why is this happening? Why do I feel this way? Why does this person use these words? Like, why not ask more questions? Not necessarily saying no, right? No, she's saying that we should ask, why are there not more possibilities? Like, we have this whole visual frame, we have this whole matrix to work within. Why not fill it completely up? I don't know if that responds to your question at all.
No, actually, that cleared a lot up. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
We're all in the collage together.
We are. It's true.
And we can be whatever line or blob we want.
I know it sounds a little hokey, but
I like that.
but it is true, because she does this, right? She literally talks about her work as a geometry. And so if you've read art history or taking art history classes, we do discuss art and paintings through a grid, right? We talk about how things are lined up, and it is a collage. It is she does set us up to interrogate in that way.
Great. Well, I think that was a positive note to land on. So
excellent.
Thank you so much, Joy, for your time and again. And I'll see you again in about 5 weeks for our last one of the semester.
Yes.
So thank you again.
Thank you. Thanks for hanging in. I appreciate it. And y'all have a good rest of your class.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yay, thank you.
Bye. Joy's gonna take off, but if you can all stay for a moment, I would appreciate it. Bye, Joy. All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that, or if not enjoyed it, got something out of it. And I hope you're not leaving. Please don't leave yet, everyone. We're not done. I want to talk to you just a little bit about your assignments. Just to be clear, once again, we have one last assignment which posted, and it is about this lecture and about the readings. And so hopefully you will have something to say. Again, I don't want it to, it's not a paper, it is a response, only about 200 words. Don't stress out, but a lot of what you have been doing with the Medea piece, I do want to hear what you think. You don't have to defend it. I just am kind of interested to hear the connections that you're making. That's really what's most important to me for you to get out of this course. The connections between, it can be an art, but it perhaps is the connection to your life or something, some other part of your world. I love hearing and reading everything that you all have written so far. So you have one more thing, as I mentioned, that posted today. No quiz, so it's just this inclination response. I suggest that you just get it done right now if you can. And then some of you are still turning in your assignments. Please just continue to do that. Once again, I want to reiterate, even if the due date has passed, please continue to turn in the assignments so that you can get credit. I'm not going to take off. I might take off a couple points, but you're not going to fail. Please you will fail if you don't turn in assignments, let's put it that way. Please turn them in, and especially the ones with the most points associated with them. That would be the Medea and this Inclinations response. Those two together are worth 50 points. So that's 50% of your grade. Lastly, I know I'm not receiving the responses to the artist lecture, but if you have not turned in the artist lecture, remember on October 8th, we had that visiting lecture, Marissa Jean, and you were supposed to turn in a response on a form. And it really was just like 3 questions that you had to respond to. If you haven't done that, please make sure you do that as well, because that is 10% of your overall grade. Once again, even if it's like 1 sentence, just turn it in so you get some points so that we can make sure that you're successful in this course, okay? I think that's it. Any questions? I sent the response, but it wasn't graded. Oh, you mean you sent the, yeah. You may not have received the grade in Teams. Thank you for bringing that up. Because that form was made outside of Teams, we're still learning how this works. We weren't able to import it into the grades in Teams. So I know that some of you are probably curious what's going on, because the 4 of us instructors may have been doing different things. I have put all of your grades into Teams. So you should be able to see if you've turned in, if you go under the grade tabs, you'll be able to see what you received on, I do points, not grades, but you'll see how many points you got for each assignment. Other instructors are not using the Teams grading app. So they, or whatever, it's not an application, but the grading tab. So they are keeping track of your grade. If you have turned in an assignment and you'd like to know the grade, I would ask you to contact that instructor to give you that information. Again, I'm not sure what the other instructors were doing as far as returning assignments. Does anyone, have you received any other assignments from other instructors with grades on them? Does anyone want to respond to that?
Yes.
Okay, so you have turned in an assignment and then received a grade, and it was in Teams or not necessarily in Teams, but you knew what you got on the assignment?
Yeah, they use Teams to let us know our grades, at least for me.
Okay. Is there anyone who doesn't know what their grade was for a particular assignment with an instructor that they would like to know? You can put it in the chat. Yeah.
Because I turned in we had 3 assignments for our first instructor, and I didn't know how to work the thing to turn in my assignments, but I did them and eventually figured it out and turned them in late. But now when I go on Teams and I scroll to the bottom, it says no points for all the assignments I turned in.
Okay, that was Professor Washington.
No, I think it was
Oh, Heather.
Yes.
Your first professor was art, or your first thing that you did, right? Besesti? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I think Professor Besesti wasn't using Teams, and so I'll check in with her about that, okay? Art session was not graded. Okay, so do most of you not know what you got in the art section as far as grades go? Just give a thumbs up if you, looks like David had the same problem. Does anyone know what their grade was in the art section? Let's put it that way. Okay, looks like most people don't know. So let me talk with Professor Besesti and see I know that basically if you weren't doing well, she probably would have contacted you to let you know that, but let's just make sure so that so that everybody feels comfortable with how you're progressing, okay? Did you have any other questions about grading or any of those types of things that I could help you with? Because I do want to make sure that you understand. I know some students have been confused because it is difficult having 4 different professors. What I will do is ask Professor Bessesti to contact you with your grades. All right, Ronaldo, I see. Ronaldo, are you unaware of your grade standing for everything or just for that particular section that Professor Bessesti taught? In general, okay. Is that how most people feel about what, I mean, okay, so you do know where you're standing in my course, I hope. I mean, in my session here. Yes, okay. But in the other sections, most of you are unclear about where you stand with your grade, correct? You can give me a thumbs up. Yes, or a yes.
I don't have my grade for the Marissa John talk, but I think I had Miss Washington when that was.
Yeah, so Yumna, it's true for the art response, you may not have gotten a grade. I mean, you will get one, but it wasn't graded through teams. That is correct. No one has had that grade. So if, unless your instructor contacted you, then you probably did fine on that. Yeah. I wasn't able to connect that assignment to teams. So even my section, I wasn't able to figure out how to put it in there. But I have contacted my students. Your original instructor is the one who should contact you about that particular assignment. I've contacted my students about the ones that either need to do something more or didn't turn it in, for instance. Okay. I will reiterate this to the rest of the professors for all of you, and I'm sure you're not the only section that's feeling this way, so I really appreciate you letting me know, and we will, I guess what you can be assured in is that unless you're doing badly, you probably won't hear from us. So we have been contacting students who are not doing well, and if you have received any progress reports from Navigate, which is in the UH Access, or from your advisor about this course, that would be something that you need to contact your original instructor and talk with them about. Otherwise, if you haven't received any communication from your original instructor about your that you're not doing well, then you are doing fine. On the last day of class, we'll talk about the undergraduate grading policy for this semester. As you're aware, there is an interim grading policy in which you can choose at the end of the semester, after you know what your grade is, you can choose to do a pass or fail. Well, not fail, but you're not going to choose to fail. But you can choose the way your grade is put on your GPA. So for instance, if this turns out to not be as high of a, if it's going to affect your GPA, you can choose to just take this course for credit, and the grade will not be put into your GPA. So that's going to be somewhat of a comfort for you if you feel like you have to maintain a certain GPA if this course, or any course that you've taken at UH, is going to affect it. You are able to take, I believe it's called an F, which is just that it's satisfied the core, and it's satisfied what you needed to do, but the grade is not going to be in your GPA. Hopefully that gives you a little more comfort or in general this semester, as long as it's above a D minus, okay? We can't do that for you if you are failing, but certainly anything above a D minus, you can take that F. We'll talk more about that on the last day, and you have until December 23rd to choose that option. So once you get all your grades in, after you've done all your finals, you can be like, I don't know, and then you can alert the school. I think it has to be through your advisor. All right, does that help? Any other questions? No? Awesome. Almost everybody was here. I want to just confirm that there weren't some people who came late who I didn't get. Let me quickly go onto our participant list and make sure. I do not have Jonathan here. Jonathan, are you here? Did you join us late? I don't see you. Okay. I do not have Paul here. I do not have Vivian here, and I do not have Nibaha. Everyone else I have marked down. So you are free to go unless you're one of those people who wants to make sure that you get credit. You guys, it's been a pleasure. Really, thank you so much for your responses. I've really enjoyed getting to know you through writing since I don't get to see your faces. But I do feel like I know you a little bit through your writing and through your ritual journals. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the course. Remember, on November 3rd, which is next Tuesday, there is no class. Take the day off. Go vote if you haven't already. You have until tomorrow to do early voting, and I highly recommend, as I mentioned before, doing the drive-through. There's also 24-hour voting places that are around, so go ahead and do that. And I will see you on the last day of class on December 3rd. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.